best part. Good evening, and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay family, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is the importance of reporting, having a paper trail and records when you're dealing with any type of abuse. We have with us our co-host, Mark Daria. And we have our guest for this evening, Jennifer Dipillio, Esquire. She is the director of the Crime Victims Law Project for Delaware County Victim Assistance Center. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or our co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com, or you can also text us at 437-778-3299. If you also have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, any local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Mark, I would ask you if you would go first and greeting our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Thank you, and welcome, Love Bay community. Looking forward to another exciting evening here. Happy Friday, everyone, and let's get going.
Thank you. Jennifer, if you would reintroduce yourself to Love Bay.
Sure. Good evening. And Mark took my favorite line, Happy Friday. My name is Jennifer Dipillio. I am an attorney. I have been an attorney for over 23 years. I am the director of the Crime Victims Law Project, which works out of Delaware County Victim Assistance Center. And Delaware County Victim Assistance Center assists victims of crimes, all sorts of crimes, get all kinds of help, a lot of advocacy and assistance with interviews and police and court. And I direct the law project. So I'm the attorney that helps with the free legal services.
Thank you so much. So Love Bay, as usual, we want to start with sharing some resources for you on this evening. If you would like to donate to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., which is my non-profit, you can write a check to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. Our address is P.O. Box 15. We are in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. Our zip is 19026. We help with immediate and emergency funding for individuals dealing with the results of domestic violence. We help with paying for doctor visits, transportation, relocation, anything that a victim or survivor would need help with financially. We try our best to help with that or to connect individuals with resources. I want to share the National Domestic Violence Hotline. This is in the United States. The website is thehotline.org. Their phone number, 24-hour hotline, is 1-800-799-7233. Also in the United States, we have the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. Their website is loveisrespect.org, and their phone number is 1-866-331-9474. And then we also have Jennifer's office, the Crime Victims Law Project. Their address is 204 South Avenue in Media, Pennsylvania, 19063. And their 24-hour hotline is 610-566-4342. And as Jennifer pointed out to me and reminded me before we came on air, if you call this number and if you happen not to qualify for whatever resources or assistance that may come from the Crime Victims Law Project directly, they will be able to direct you to where you need to go. So don't call because you think they might not be able to help you. You will get what you need, even if it is them directing you to another source. So I want to encourage individuals to reach out. Again, our topic on tonight is the importance of reporting abuse, having a paper trail and records. And I really want to start by saying it can be very important and helpful to report abuse that's committed against you. But at the same time, we do know and understand that some victims choose not to report. And they choose not to report for several different reasons. So no matter what people think, no matter what people may believe, you know your situation sometimes reporting or going through avenues that other individuals would take may escalate danger for you. You know what that looks like. So we're not trying to force anyone in any one direction, but I want to throw that out there. And we have real live examples. There was a young woman who she needed the assistance of police and she needed an ambulance, and they came to her home. She was being victimized. When they got there, she refused to go to the hospital because the guys driving the ambulance, the EMT workers, were friends of the man who was abusing her. Now, to the naked eye, you see this situation doesn't make sense. But when she explained, this is who these guys are, not that they had anything to do with that situation, but she refused to enter that ambulance. And when those present understood why, they made other arrangements for her. So again, to the naked eye, things may not seem to be what you think that they are, but we do not want to take away the autonomy from any victim on what he or she decides to do. So we just wanted to shed some light on that, how it can be helpful to file reports and to keep a paper trail if necessary, if that is what your situation allows you to do. So having said that, Jennifer, I would like it if you could start first again by telling us exactly what is the Crime Victims Law Project, what it was designed to do, and what it is that you do as we move forward in our talk for tonight.
Sure. So the Crime Victims Law Project was founded in 2001. I was a baby when I was brought on in 2001. And it was a 4-county collaborative project where we worked with 4 rape crisis centers. And there were 2 attorneys, myself and another attorney, and we each had 2 counties that we worked in. The whole purpose was the executive directors had seen that there was a real need that was missing for their clients who were coming into their rape crisis agencies to get legal assistance with things that fell out of their victimization. So, what we ended up doing, what we do the most would be family law type cases. So that would be protection from abuse, custody, child support, and divorce. That's, I would say, of all of those, protection and abuse are probably the biggest chunk of cases that we take. But all in all, it's mostly family law, and it's been super helpful. I've seen how things have changed over the years. So we went from having 4 rape crisis centers and having all different attorneys, and it slowly, petered out to just Delaware County. So it's just solo me in Delaware County. I have 1 staff person now, and it. What we discovered early on is that it was really important. A lot of counties have legal aid, which is you qualify for their services based on your income and your output in your household. What we discovered early on is that there's a huge swath of people that we're missing that don't qualify for those services because maybe they're working, um, but they still can't afford an attorney and a retainer for an attorney, which a lot of attorneys charge thousands of dollars for an initial, like, come in and let's talk about what your case is. I need $5,000 to get started. And then they work down from that amount of money by billing out at an hourly rate. Most attorneys charge 200, 300 and up an hour. So we decided that we were going to focus on that group, that middle group that can't afford an attorney but doesn't qualify for free legal services from legal aid. And we found that it was a huge number of people. We have, since I started, we've hit over the 1,000 mark for cases, and for each case that we have, or person, I should say, that we represent, we may represent them on multiple legal issues. So someone may come to me and say, I need a protection from abuse, I need custody, I need a divorce, I have this other stuff going on, and we'll help them with all of those things as long as it's qualifies under our grant. And I think it's been a really useful tool. And why I said to Pastor Tia in the opening before we started is that our organization has been so great. So the agency itself has been so great in fielding phone calls because we have that 24/7 hotline that a person answers the phone. You're not going to get a voicemail or have to leave a message. You're going to talk to a real person. And if we can't help you because you don't qualify under the funding that we receive, we know all of the other organizations in our county and we can direct you to someone else that can help you. So we try really hard to not just, I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, well, I tried all these other places and they couldn't help me. Can you help me? If I can't, I will definitely do research and try to find someplace that can. It's really important for us to make sure that people are heard and represented.
Well, thank you so much for that. So with that, and again, we're talking about the importance of reporting abuse, reporting the crime that happened against you, and having a paper trail and documentation, keeping your records. How can reporting abuse help victims and survivors as they move forward through whichever system they may be? It may be child support, it may be the crime, it may be custody. How can reporting and keeping that paper trail be of a help?
It's for an attorney, first of all, attorneys love paper. We love paper. We love all kinds of documentation. It's so important for us because when we're putting on a case, we want to be able to say, here, look at this. Look at this police report. Look at this, and police reporting doesn't have to be scary. I think I tell clients all the time, just call and ask them to take a report. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be super formal where you have to go and they have to interview you. You just be like, hey, this happened. Can you at least just make a report? I don't want you to do anything with it. I don't want you to contact the individual. I don't want you to start a criminal case. I just want you to take the report. I tell people that all the time because it's so important when we're in court to say, look, she reported 3 other times that this happened. So it almost goes to, it must be true if we're talking about it now that it happened again, right? If you don't do that reporting part, then it becomes, well, if it did happen in the past, then why didn't you take that extra step and make the report? Now, as a trauma-informed lawyer, I understand why people don't report. There's mistrust in the community. There's, maybe there was an interaction in the past that didn't go very well. I get that. And I try to encourage clients to utilize the services of our agency, which is having an advocate that's not an attorney that would go with you to do that reporting, to like ease your mind and make you know that you're not alone in doing that. And I think it helps a lot of clients to know that they're going to the police station to make a report and they know their options ahead of time because they've had a conversation with me. Like, you can make the report and you don't have to do anything with it. You can change your mind and say you want to move forward on that report at some point later. That's okay. But it's great to have it documented. And in the alternative, if you choose not to document it, what I would say, because we love paper and we love proof, it's really important to keep your own notes. And maybe we're going to get to that, so I don't want to go too far afield.
Well, no, so that was actually my next point. And then, Mark, I'll go to you for your thoughts. I was going to say that it is very, very important. Once you file this paperwork, once you do what you need to do, you need to keep up with it. You need to keep your paperwork, and your own handwritten notes are very, very important. And these are things that I did for myself. And I understand the frustration of dealing with paperwork and dealing with different courts at the same time. My divorce went through one court. Child support went through another court. Custody went through another court. When he was arrested, that was another court. And I had the paperwork from all of those instances, and his arrest was a direct bearing on my having to go to the hospital and have surgery. So I have the paperwork from the doctor's office, from the surgery. I know how frustrating it could be to have to handle all of this information from these different places. And when you're talking to one, they don't want to hear about the other stuff. At least in my case, what I went through. And then there were instances where I didn't have a document from a court, but I had my own handwritten notes. This happened at this moment. This is a response that I got. I had so official documents, emails, phone calls, or notes from the phone calls. I didn't record phone calls, but I had text messages. And I can say that there were times when I walked into a courtroom, I just put these emails on the table. Like I'm not going back and forth. I'm not going to fight. Like this is what he said. He put it in writing. And I was actually surprised at some of the things he actually put in writing by text or email. So that was helpful to me because I could just put this information not down just in front of the court or the representatives, but he also knew, like at some point he understood I can't keep talking to her this way because she's actually recording this and she's giving it to these individuals and authorities. So that was another way in which it helped me because he actually started changing the words that he used, or he would stick to the topic within even text messages, because I think he thought that he could just do whatever he wanted and a text message nothing would come of it. But no, I'm going to screenshot this or I'm going to email it to myself or whatever. And this is now proof of what you did. Date, time stamped, everything. So again, I understand the frustration of it all, but there were many times where being detailed, and I'm detail oriented anyway, but there were many times where keeping those details, keeping all those emails and the paperwork together, it was helpful. So, I mean, there were times when I literally did not have to speak. I could just like, here are these documents right here. So again, I understand the frustration, but if this is the road that you feel that you should take for yourself, it really can be helpful. Yes, it will be tiring. Yes, you do need to be meticulous. You do need to keep up on this information. And I can say it gets confusing. Sometimes you forget. Sometimes stuff runs into each other. One incident can run into another, and trying to remember everything, it can just be so overwhelming. But when you have the paperwork, and especially when you have your own notes and you can go back and you can see, like, this is what happened, this is the way it happened, this is how I remembered, it can be helpful to you. And in some ways, kind of like journaling, it can not only be helpful to you lawfully, but I think it can be helpful mentally and emotionally as well. So Mark, I'll stop there and let you jump in, and then Jennifer, you can add on to that.
Well, you jumped into most of what I was going to ask about, so I can just stop talking now. But no, I'll never do that. But first of all, before we even get into anything, Jennifer, you're doing fantastic work, and thank you so much for everything that you do for the community and for people. As a kind of an aside, how do you keep your upbeat attitude? You seem like a very positive person, and you're dealing with a lot of incredible stuff. And so kudos to you for that. If maybe we have a subsection on how to survive with a smile in adversity.
Yes. Yes.
But no, actually echoing everything Tia was saying, I did want to kind of drill down on that to the people listening as to what exactly are you looking for to be able to successfully prosecute this? So I'm going to let you run with that. But before I come to a full stop, I just want to say, yes, the importance of meticulously keeping notes. And that's great if you're an anal retentive personality. Not so great if you're not. But you've really got to get yourself into the mindset. So I really want you to elaborate a bit on exactly what it is that's going to help you to help them. And one big thing that's missing is photographs. Take pictures. Take pictures of this.
Absolutely,
Pictures
yeah.
do speak 1,000 words. And so even if you're not the most articulate or the most precise note keeper, if you're taking photos and they're date stamped, you don't need a whole lot. You could do a little caption underneath it to an extent. Correct or not? I'll let you run with that.
Yes, very correct. So, like I said, attorneys love paperwork. And so when we're prepping cases, it's really important. We are trying to recreate in our minds what you went through and to do it in a chronological order, right? So we sit down with a client and we're like, okay, so we're meeting them at that endpoint, and we have to go back to the beginning and figure out where it all started and then move forward from there, because we're telling a story and we have a very short period of time. And all of my cases are not jury trials. They're in front of a judge because it's family court. And so you have a little bit of time that you need to try to bring that court up to speed on this person's snippet of their life. and try to convince them that this actually happened to them, right?
Mhm.
So it's in when we're in court and we have testimony, and testimony sometimes can be enough, but it's your word versus the other person's word. It's who seems the most um, trustworthy and truthful and reliable, and being trauma informed. And I say that all the time because trauma affects different people different ways. Not
Mhm.
everybody's going to react similarly. We had a case about a year ago in our office where it had been a while since the client's sexual assault. She was on the stand for a protection from abuse case, and she was very strong on the stand. Um, she had pictures. She was very specific. Um, for some reason, the judge didn't like that, and in her opinion, actually said she didn't act victimized because she didn't cry. She didn't break down on the stand. Um, you know, some people in trauma get angry, rightfully
Mhm.
so. I mean, and this wasn't something that had recently happened to her. Some time had passed. I think a year had gone by from the actual assault. So at that point, she'd had time to sort of run through her emotions. And I try to make people understand it because it's a lot like when you're grieving, when you go through a death of a close family friend or even pet, you sort of run through the gamut of,
Yeah.
you don't believe it, you're in denial, and then you're accepting of it, and then you're sort of depressed and crying, and then you're angry, all of those things, and they can happen at different times. There's no set sort of time frame of how that happens. So it is really important to have very specific timeline because it helps us to recreate that story and be able to pick what stuff we're going to focus on that's going to be most effective in telling that story. So I tell clients all the time, you don't have to sit there and take, like, I'm taking paper notes. You don't have to sit there and take paper notes. Not everybody, I'm old school. You don't have to do that. You can do a voice memo into your phone. You can type it into everybody, I think, for the most part, has some kind of a device that they're carrying around, a phone that is basically a computer in your pocket. So use that if that's easier for you. Figure out a way that's going to work for you. And I will say what Tia said about it can be very confusing. I have so many people come to me and have so many balls in the air. Like, they have a protection from abuse case they filed, they have a criminal case they filed, and there's people calling them from different places, and they don't understand who's connected to what agency and what place. And it really matters to sit and have a conversation, sit down and say, okay, I'm going to explain this to you so that you can get this straight in your head. And and they're getting papers mailed from the court and from the
Mhm.
police reports, and just there's so much to manage. So I would say keeping all the papers, so important to keep them all, even if you just keep them in a folder and you have somebody like myself or someone in our agency that'll sit there and sort of sort through them with you and help you. It's just, it's so easy to forget a date or time. And I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed a client and am trying to get information, and they say, well, I don't remember when that happened. Okay, do you remember, like, the year, the season, the month? Like, we're trying to, and it makes it, for the court, not for me, less believable when you don't have that
Sure.
sort of tattooed in your brain. So that's the other reason why it's so important, because it goes to the court, looks at that as credibility for you. If this was so traumatic, how could you not remember? Well, because people that are trauma informed know that for some people, they block it out because they can't deal with it internally and mentally. And so they don't even, they don't remember it sort of subconsciously on purpose. So the pictures are really important. We've had a lot of cases where pictures came into play, very important. Um, we as attorneys have to authenticate all of those things. So having the actual victim take those pictures and take the notes makes it easier for us to be able to authenticate it. If you as a victim take your own notes, we can have you look at them and refresh your recollection. If you're on the stand and you're testifying and you don't remember, you can look at those because they're yours. So that's it's the reporting isn't necessary. And like I said earlier, I know that it doesn't work for some people, and that's okay. So we sit and we craft what works for you as an individual. I start with, where do you want to be at the end of this? What's the end game? And then we talk about whether that's a reasonable expectation or not. And then we sort of make sure there's a reasonable expectation. And then we work, and I am, the least resistant path. That's the way I want to get you there. So it's the least difficult path to that end spot where you're going to feel some sense of safety for yourself.
So, thank you for sharing what you shared. I want to say from a personal experience, the experience that you shared makes absolute, total, and perfect sense. Because from the moment that I began to share my story, the moment that I began to open up, people told me that they did not believe me. There were some sincere people who told me they thought, I must be wrong. I must be remembering things the wrong way because I didn't break down in tears. And I mean from the very beginning of telling my story. It wasn't that I had time to go over things and put it aside. No, from the very beginning, I could just tell you what he did, and I didn't cry. I could tell you exactly what happened, how it happened, and I didn't show emotion. I just didn't, and it wasn't that I wasn't trying not to. I was just able to give you the information, to give you the facts. And so, because I wasn't crying, because I didn't look upset, because I didn't sound upset, there were people who I thought would have supported me and encouraged me. They didn't believe my story. So I understand what that's like. And also putting information together, having the records or even your own notes. For me personally, my own notes, it actually really helped me to just remember because like I said, sometimes things get jumbled up. But for me, even today, right now, there are specific time frames that I can't remember. I can't tell you if it was winter or spring, but I can tell you if it was day or night, like things like that. I remember the daytime and I remember the nighttime. That's what stands out to me. I can't tell you if it was the summer. I can't tell you what time of year it was.
And even if you're a fabulous testifier, and the court believes you, having that paper trail sort of is it's an extra step to make the court understand that this is the truth, right? Like it's just if you have multiple things like I went to the hospital, here's my hospital record, I contacted the police and made a police report, and here's my notes that I made that day. That's three things that you did to track what happened to you. So for the court, you're trying to prove your case to someone who doesn't know you at all, and they don't understand your psyche or where you've been or where you're going. And so just having those multiple layers makes it a stronger of a case. And I hate to say that because as attorneys, you're supposed to just be able to have testimony, and the court is supposed to have all this knowledge and know that you're telling the truth and you're telling a lie. It's really not that way. I've talked to so many judges that say they have heard a case, and it doesn't qualify based on the statute, let's say, but then they see the interaction between the two people and how like the let's say the male is very disrespectful or does something, and then it's like, well, if you're doing that to me, then you must have done something to her, and then there's that leap, right? So everybody has their own biases too that they come with, and you don't know what they are. So we're all dealing with that. So the more stuff that you have to say this happened to me, the less likely it is that you're going to be denied that you're correct in your recollection.
Yes. So thank you for that. But I want to move into, you said statutes. That was actually the next topic that I wanted to get to. So you've already stated that, a victim or survivor you can make a report without pressing charges. You can have that information. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is that, can you speak to the issue of statutes of limitations and reporting a crime? So can a victim actually, if I make this report, aside from just having it for informational purposes to remember, just to document what happened, can a victim move forward at a later date with pressing charges or whatever it is that the next step may be? Can they make that decision, and how does statute of limitations play into that?
Sure. You can always go back and say that you want to move forward on a report, as long as it's within that statute of limitations. So for different crimes, it's going to be different lengths of time. Typically, like in sexual assault cases, it's generally very long. It's 6 years or more. In other crimes like harassment, which we see a lot in sort of stalking type cases, that's going to be a shorter period of time. Don't quote me, but I think it may be 2 years. And I will say the other issue is the further we get away from the actual underlying incident, the harder it is to get other evidence. So we always like to have not just the evidence from the victim themselves, but if there's other evidence that can be garnered, like were there other people around that we can talk to? Was there, just other records or anything else that we can go get that'll back it up? So as time goes on, it becomes harder to remember those things and be able to contact those people or those agencies or organizations. So it definitely is more. It makes the case harder. I had a client just recently. So she has a temporary PFA against her ex-husband, and he violated the PFA multiple times. The police charged him with one count of indirect criminal contempt, which is that he didn't follow the protection order and he violated it. He got out on bail and then immediately violated it again. And my client, he called her first. So he was calling her from jail. And she called the police and she said, he's blowing up my phone. I would like you to take a report. So he said, okay, I'll take the report. And then he said, do you want me to do anything else with it? So she knows this police officer because they've had issues. And she said, no, I just want you to take the report. And he said, okay. And then 10 minutes later, she calls back. And she goes, no, I'd like you to do something with it. I changed my mind. And he goes, okay. And he charged him with another count of indirect criminal contempt for the phone calls. So you always have that option. And it's great to have a conversation with somebody else because the police aren't going to explain to you what the process looks like. And that's one of the first things I try to do with clients because I'll say, okay, if you take the path of making a police report and saying you want to proceed, this comes up a lot in Title IX cases, which is, school-based harassment. They can have three things going on at once. So you can have a criminal case, you can have a protection from abuse case, and then you can have your Title IX administrative case happening at school. And it becomes very confusing because people don't know which is what. So the first thing I do is sit down and explain all three things. And anything that you have as an option. I want to explain that to you first so that you can make a good decision and a good choice about what path that you want to take. You can always go back and do the criminal later if you want to do that. I had a client that was strangled by a significant other, and the police wanted to charge him, and she didn't want the charges. And she said, I just want to go the protection from abuse path. I really don't have it in me. She was having a lot of mental health struggles at the time. She had an eating disorder. She was really not well. And she just really, at that point, didn't have the strength to handle that criminal case that can go on, mind you, for 2 years, possibly. You don't know how long they're going to go on. And you need to know that going in, that this isn't going to be quick. You're going to have a couple quick things that are going to happen in the beginning, and then it's just going to sit there for a really long time. That's what it's going to feel like on your end because it seems like nothing's happening. Then you have the protection from abuse case, which can be very quick. You file your temporary order, and within 10 days, you're back in court again with your offender in court, and then you're deciding if you're going to move forward or if that's going to be continued, dependent upon whatever else is going on in your case. So it's a lot. So I sit down, have a conversation, and they make a decision about what path they're going to go down. That strangulation client, she 2 years later, when her PFA had expired, she wanted to get it renewed. We went back to court, and the other side wasn't going to agree. And I said, well, she's much stronger now than she was before. And if we don't get this renewed, she's going to go right down to the police station and they're going to charge him with strangulation because it's still available as an option to her. And so they agreed, and she was happy with that outcome. But she always had that option, and it really is dependent on you and what you feel is appropriate for you. There's not one path for anybody. It really just depends on what it is that you want.
So, Mark, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I think and it is being brought out here. I think it's very important it can't be understated that this is a journey. This is a long process. And it's not because the system doesn't care, but you've got understaffed, overworked people who are trying to discern what the truth is in all of this. And it's a very long process. There's an old saying, where you stand depends upon where you sit. And what is for the individual the most traumatic event or one of the most traumatic events in their life. It's one of 1,000 cases to the people in that courtroom. And that's a hard thing to digest, because personally, we all want to stand up and start screaming, why aren't I getting justice? Why isn't this being rectified? And, it is, and to an extent, but there's another, so it's important to bring all of that out. Having said that, I'm wondering if you can speak to the incidence of suicides in these kinds of circumstances, because I know that runs high.
Yeah, I will say that I'm fortunate enough in the 23 years that I've done this work that I have not had that happen.
Mhm.
But one of my coworkers did have that happen to a client. So um, she was just very frustrated with how long the process was taking. And I think her mental health was suffering, and she ended up taking her own life. It was a really sad situation. I think her son had been murdered, and the trial was just everything was just taking forever. And they were finally making some progress. Um, from a third party standpoint, they were making some progress. Things were going to start happening, and I think she just wasn't able to handle everything. And it's sad. It is really sad. The process, that's why it's so important for you to find help where they're going to sit and have these conversations with you. Private attorneys aren't going to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about all your options and decide. They go, someone walked in my office and I'm a private attorney and they go, I want to file for custody. I go, great, sit down, let's go. I don't do that with my clients. I say, okay, why don't you tell me what's going on and we can decide if that's really the best path, right? Like sometimes it's not. I've had clients that come in and say, I haven't seen him in a really long time. And I know if I file something, he's going to start up again and then things are going to get wild and out of hand and whatever. And I say, well, then maybe this isn't the time for us to do that. The longer we have a space where he's not having any interaction with the child, maybe we can go in 6 months later or a year later and be able to get you full custody because he's been out of the picture for a really long time. But if it hasn't been that long yet, then like let sleeping dogs lie sometimes,
Right.
and that's just from my experience. I've seen that as soon as you do something, then all of a sudden I want to see the kid, I want to do this, I want to do that. And it's like, if they don't want him in the child's life for whatever reason, I respect that. And then like I said, we're always trying to figure out a path to get you to that end result without as trying to minimize the trauma, right? The other thing you have to realize too is if you start multiple things, like you have a protection case, maybe you have a custody case, you have a criminal case, you have to testify multiple times about the same thing. And people don't understand. I never ask somebody to tell me their story initially until I actually need it because I don't want them to be continually re-victimized by having to go through that story over and over and over again. And it sort of can be numbing too, because then when you finally have your chance to tell your story, you're sort of, you're over it almost. Like you've said it so many times that it's like it's numb in your brain. So we don't talk about it until I absolutely need to talk about it because I have to prep for my hearing. But if you're making a police report, so you're telling your story, and then the DA's office asks you to tell the story yet again. Then you have to go and testify at a preliminary hearing and you have to say it again. Then you're meeting with me in my office about a protection case and if it was some other attorney they'd ask you to say it again. And then if you have to testify, you're saying it again in court. So it's a lot. So I try to make people understand that too, and that they're going to have to see their attacker, their offender. They're going to have to see
Right.
them in court. Some people
Mhm.
immediately are like, "Oh, I didn't know that I was going to have to see him as soon as next week because I just filed this week for this protection case. I thought I was going to be able to not see him at all." And I said, "No. I mean, I try to keep my clients out of the courtroom for as long as humanly possible until the judge like makes me bring them in. I try to work out agreements so they don't have to testify, but there are cases where they do have to be in the same room and it can be extremely traumatizing. So it's something that you need to know. Like you need to have that information to make a good decision for yourself.
Yeah.
So, Jennifer, as we've been sitting here, at least for the bulk of the hour, we're in Pennsylvania. I'm in Pennsylvania. My mind has been in Pennsylvania, but as you were talking, I started thinking, what about when we start crossing state lines? What about when it becomes international? How it's already hard when the victim is where you are located in the same vicinity. But what happens when the paperwork starts crossing state lines, or it could be international? Like, is the statute of limitations, does it change from state to state? Is it, when you're dealing with the US and then you're all of a sudden you find yourself over in Russia or whatever, what happens to trying to keep a documented paper trail when you have to go outside of where you live, when it's crossing other areas?
Yeah, even so, every state has different laws and different statutes of limitation. And we had a case a number of years ago where it started. It was a domestic violence victim. She fled from Louisiana. I'm sorry, Oklahoma. She fled from Oklahoma to Pennsylvania, and I couldn't represent her because the case was already started in Oklahoma. What I did was I found an attorney that would help her in Oklahoma, and I worked as sort of the go-between so that she didn't have to talk to the attorney there. She would just talk to me because she could come in and talk to me in person, and I would relay everything to her to make it a little bit easier. We've often had cases where custody in particular, because that's sort of interesting. Jurisdiction in custody falls where the child has resided, and the time frame depends on the state. So in Pennsylvania, if the child has lived in Pennsylvania for 6 months, jurisdiction is in Pennsylvania. But if they're in another state, I don't know what their jurisdictional period is. So I wouldn't know if jurisdiction's there yet or not. Some of them it's immediate, some is 3 months, some 6 months, some might be a year. So it's very dependent on that particular state. So when we're dealing with multiple states or multiple countries, like international law can come into play. And so you need somebody that's going to have that knowledge. So either an attorney in the jurisdiction that you're in currently. I had a case where a client moved to Canada, and I just kept saying to her, I can only tell you about here. We can do, agreements and orders here, but once you go there, I don't know what that means, because maybe they're not going to honor it in Canada and she's going to file something there and start all over. I don't know how that works. So I'm very honest when we're dealing with other jurisdictions. I can only tell you what I know, and what I know in Pennsylvania. I also am licensed in New Jersey. I haven't practiced there in a very long time. But they have, interestingly, I think your listeners will find this interesting. In Pennsylvania, the longest term that you can get a protection from abuse like order for is 3 years, which we increased maybe 15 years ago. It was only a year and a half. And then they increased it to 3 years was the maximum you could get. Now you can go back and ask for it to be renewed, but that's a whole nother process. In New Jersey, you can get a lifetime PFA. So if we have somebody, because New Jersey and Pennsylvania are so close, if we have somebody that comes to us and says, well, some stuff maybe happened in New Jersey, we say, go to New Jersey because you can get a lifetime PFA in New Jersey. We can't do that here. And the renewal process after your 3 years is not simple. And you have to come back to court, and then you may not get it. So at least there, you have that option to have one for the rest of your life, which is amazing. I wish all states did that.
Yeah, right. That sounds great. Yeah. So I have one more question, and then I want to move to some information that Mark actually presented a bit ago. But I want to ask. Well, I want to say this, and then if you could bring some clarity to it. I do want our viewers and listeners to understand you do have autonomy over yourself. You are able to make decisions for yourself, whether you want to report or not. But there does come a time. There are some specific things that can happen where the state does not need your permission to move forward with pressing charges. Now, that's a serious matter when it comes to that. For like, I can say murder off the top. Like, if it's, the state doesn't need, any state doesn't need someone's permission to move forward with charges. You're talking about murder. So if you could just talk about that for a bit. Yes, you do have choice You do have power, but there does come a point, whether you want it or not, charges will be filed, because there will come a point where, I don't know if I'm saying this the right way, but the state is not just responsible for you, but for public at large. And so a decision will have to be made, not just for this one person, but society itself. I don't know if I said that the right way, but if you
You
could.
did. You did. That is exactly right. And that was one of the first things I was going to say. So when I explain criminal matters to clients, I say, in that, you are a witness. You are not a named party in that case. So all criminal cases are state of, or in our case, Pennsylvania is a Commonwealth, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus the defendant. And you're correct. They don't have to have your permission to file charges. They may do it on their own for the protection of the rest of the citizens of the Commonwealth. They feel it's serious enough. And I'll give you a perfect example. I got appointed guardian for two children because they called 911 when their father was beating their mother, and the police came, and the children were hysterical and relayed what had happened. Mom refused to cooperate with the police, which is her right to do that. Um, and the Commonwealth was very concerned for the children in the house, for the wife, and wanted to move forward to at least interview the children to see what they had seen in the house, to make sure that they were safe. And the mother wouldn't allow the kids to be interviewed. So they went and they asked the court for this specific order to have me appointed guardian so that I could go talk to the children without mom's permission. So I get the order from the court. I go to the children's school, meet with first the daughter who was in middle school. She started crying immediately. And, we were all concerned. There was a couple of us there, and we were very concerned. And asked her if she was okay. And she said, "I'm just so glad you're here to help me." So she wasn't getting help because her mom wouldn't allow the help in the household. And in the end, they did move forward on the charges. He ended up pleading guilty, and now he's not allowed to be in the house with the children. So at least the children are safe. That's mom's choice if she wants to stay there. And the hope is at some point in the future, she's going to be strong enough to say, I don't deserve this, but that's not our choice to decide what that time frame looks like. But as far as the kids go, it was very concerning that we were afraid he was going to do something to the children, and he had. The daughter testified that he had done stuff to the kids in the past. So at least the kids were safe. Now that's sort of extreme. That's not something that happens lightly. But murder, you're right. Like that is something they're not going to wait for somebody to say, go ahead. That's going to definitely go forward. But even for some of these other, charges, I can't remember exactly what he was charged with. I can't remember exactly. And he ended up pleading guilty to something lesser than what he was charged with. But it was looked at in the end as a success because at least the children were protected in the end.
Well, thank you so much for that clarity and information. So the point that I wanted to move forward into in doing research for our topic on tonight, Mark came across information, and I will say this and then actually just turn this over to Mark to let him move forward. What he found was information on impact statements made by victims during the sentencing phase. So some individuals may not know that part, that if you do press charges, if you go beyond, just filing a report, but if you see this all the way through and you get to the point to where, this person is charged, you are allowed, if you so choose, to speak during this. It's not testimony, but actually giving a statement on what this has done to you, at the point of this person being charged or sentenced. So I thought that was great information that Mark came across and presented. So at this point, Mark, if you want to share about that, and then Jennifer, if you could chime in on it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's kind of going to what Jennifer was speaking about earlier, is that the people involved in this, they have a rather limited perspective. That's why it's so important to garner as much information, because that's how cases have to be decided, by what's in front of you. You don't know the people, you don't know the players, and as we've spoken about in this forum many times, manipulators are masters at their art, and so they're going to come up and do a song and a dance that's going to be great. And but enough poking and prodding will reveal it. But when you have 15 minutes in front of a judge, you don't have the time to get into that. And you're just trying to go off of what's in front of you. Now, yes, gut instinct can take over, and clues can be given, but that I would think is more the exception than the rule. So it becomes all the more important to have this in front of you. And I do think that those testimonies of people, what this has done to them, and again, it's going back to that whole seeing someone in a courtroom who has raped you, who has beaten you, that you thought was behind you, but now they're sitting 5 feet from you, 10 feet from you. It's a whole different level of trauma that, again, you have to be mentally prepared for. So it's devastating when you hear any of these kinds of instances, and you wish it wasn't so, but it is so. So the only thing that we can really emphasize is to steel yourself, be ready for that journey, surround yourself with the people who can help you through that, and to document everything to make your case as successful as possible. And it's and there's ways to get help to know how to do that. Yourself being one of those kinds of people, Jennifer. This forum being one of those places to go. I do think, thinking of the listeners out there, is perhaps if you take a moment to explain the difference between a civil case and a criminal case too, just so that people understand what am I looking at, what am I getting into. If you could just take a minute and run with that. I know we're
Sure.
up coming up against the
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to say is always we encourage texting or emailing with the person that you're going to have an interaction with in court instead of phone calls, because you can't prove what you said if you're not
Right.
recording it. And in PA, you can't record it without announcing that you're recording it. So that's really important. Second, really quick thing is in Pennsylvania, we have a victim's bill of rights. So, and that goes for criminal cases because you're not a party to the action. You're just, and I don't want to say just, but you are a witness. You're considered a witness. So in the beginning of a case, you are supposed to be given this victim's bill of rights. It's typically given to you by the police when you make a report, and it will list, like my agency is listed in there, and it says all the things that you're entitled to, and an impact statement is one of them. At the end, you are able to talk to the judge and tell them what you think. And if you watch any court TV, you'll see it a lot of times on court TV where it's a very dramatic ending and somebody's saying, they get to say whatever they want. So it's empowering for some people, and they opt to do that. So the difference between criminal and civil case, family law is included in that, and that means that you are a party to that case. So your name is in the caption. So if it's me versus my husband, it's going to be Jennifer Dipillo versus Vince Dipillo. That's going to be the case caption. I have full control over what I'm doing in that case. I decide if I want to proceed, if I want to withdraw it, if I want to have testimony, if I don't. In a criminal case, you don't have full control. I will say, with the Victim's Bill of Rights, you do have rights and you do have options that are presented to you. Sentencing is sort of one of those things that's out of your control. What they're charged with is a crime out of your control. So it's sometimes victims choose not to go the path of the criminal case because they don't have full control to say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too much. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I just really can't handle it. You don't have that option. Once the ship has sailed, it's going. And
Yeah.
you can choose not to testify. That's fine. But the case may still proceed without you. In a civil case, rather, you could pull out at any time and say, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I'm not really interested. I want to withdraw my petition. I'm not moving forward. Unless you're the defendant. If you're the defendant, you can't just, I mean, you could, but you're going to lose some rights when you do that. So it's very difficult. People don't understand, and that's one of the things I do sit down and explain to make sure, this is this thing over here, and this is this thing over here, and they're two different things, and they they are not going in the same trajectory, direction or trajectory either.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. So we're just under the hour. So I want to say two things, and then I'm going to ask Mark if you would go first, and then Jennifer, just your final thoughts on this evening. I first want to share again the information for Crime Victims Law Project. The address is 204 South Avenue in Media, Pennsylvania, 19063, and the 24-hour hotline number is 610-566-4342. And in my final words on tonight, the first thing that I wanted to say, I want to speak directly to men. I know when we talk about abuse, we in general, we say women, and I think that's just for ease of conversation, but we understand that men are affected too. But I want to say specifically to men, if you find yourself in this situation, you do need to create a paper trail. If you have not done so, you do need to report. I mean, again, and if it's in your best interest to do that, because again, we know situations are different. But I've talked to men who said, I don't want to call the police because I don't want to, look like I can't handle myself. I don't want to take her to court because I don't want to look like I'm less of a man. I don't want to say that she's doing this to me because I don't want to look like I'm less than. But if you have been hurt, if your property has been damaged, you have every right to care for yourself, to care for your property, to do what you need to do. So I want to encourage men. Yes, you can and should, if you are able to, if you're comfortable in that situation, to report abuse, to create a paper trail, and to maintain those records. If you're not allowed to see your children, if you have a court agreement, if that agreement is broken, then you need to record that. If you didn't get your visits, or if your visits were cut short, you need to record record all of that. Write it down, the things that she said or done. I've just talked to a lot of men who just say, I'm just going to let it be. Well, you keep letting it be, it's going to stay what it is or continue to get worse. And actually, I believe it would, if you have to stand before a judge, if you have this information, it may be of a help to you. So I wanted to say that. And then the last thing that I wanted to say, when you do get to this point, if you do have the paperwork, if you do have your notes and information, when you get to that point to where you can throw it away, where you don't need it, and I can speak for myself, it's very therapeutic. When I got to that point, when I was able to delete the emails and shred the paperwork, because I had boxes of papers and, years later, I didn't need them. Now, I have my divorce decree. That is information that you keep. I have the decree from the court for child support. I have a decree for custody, like the final paperwork, those orders. I have that. But everything else, the back and forth, the conversations, the remarks, the report, I got rid of everything. When I knew and understood I don't need it anymore at this point. And for me, it was just so freeing to get rid of that. The only document that I know, and I'm just thinking about it, that I have offhand is the paperwork from the surgery that I had to have with the hospital paperwork. And to be honest, thinking about it right now, I don't even know why I still have it. I just put it somewhere and it was just there. And maybe that'd be the next part of my healing process, to get rid of that paperwork too. But when you get to that point, when you're on the other side, when you are safe, when you're through the courts, when you're through the system, when it's truly done and behind you, I can say that it's a very, very good feeling when you can get rid of it, because all those, it was a reminder. It was annoying. It was frustrating. And it was very difficult to just see the papers at times or see the emails. So anyone, if you're at that point, or when you get to that point, I can say, I hope it would be for you as it was for me, just a therapeutic moment to be able to get through that part of it. So Mark, and then Jennifer, if you would leave us with your final words on tonight for Love Day.
Sure. First of all, thanks for taking the time, Tia, to call out that fact that men are abused too. As you were saying that, I was thinking of a good friend of mine back in my days when I grew up in New York, who was a battered spouse, and she would beat him because she knew he would never raise his hand to her, and he would not pursue it legally because she was the mother of their children. And it took them about 10, 12 years to actually finally go for the divorce and get out from under it. So it is a real issue with men too, obviously predominantly women, but men also go through this and suffer quietly, more quietly than women more often. So it's a terrible thing. Basically, as a kind of I don't know, a bellwether, if you want to put it like that, or just a thought. There's an old saying that the first time a man raises his hand to a woman is the hardest. And that stayed with me throughout most of my life. It's a saying I heard as, I guess, a teenager or so, but there's a lot of truth to that. And to the people that are listening, if you are a victim of this, if you have been a victim of domestic violence, it doesn't matter how nice the person is the next day, and what flowers you get and what candies and what have you, and all the niceties. If you've been abused, you will be abused again, and it's going to get harder each time because it's going to become easier for the perpetrator. And so please bear that in mind, and hopefully what this discussion the last hour could serve as a launch pad to helping you to frame that and put it in perspective as to what you need to do to protect yourself and others that may be in your life. And I could go on, but Jennifer, you need to wrap up for us.
Thank you. I will echo the same, that our office does help men, women, children, people of all ages, all genders. And I have found over the years that men severely are underreported in this arena for all the reasons that you've mentioned. So my hope is that this information will help you moving forward. And if this isn't the time that you're going to be able to pick up and go, that you're just going to get yourself prepared and ready for when it's most appropriate and most safe for you. Keeping the paper trail in a safe way, however it's safe for you, because we know that domestic violence, the perpetrators can be very controlling and want to know everything. So doing it in a way that's safe, if there's some kind of way to password protect something on your phone or notes, or hiding them somewhere or with somebody else, that's a fabulous way to get started. And hopefully you'll find an organization like mine that can help you walk through the process with peace of mind.
Mm-hmm. But thank you so much, Jennifer. I appreciate you being here with us tonight. Mark, as usual, thank you so much for being with us. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. Thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. On Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Good evening.